And we start with a Fox News alert. Angry anti-Trump liberals taking to the streets in major cities all across the country to protest President-elect Donald Trump's huge, massive victory. Rob Schmidt, he's live on the ground in the middle of one of these protests in the heart of New York City. Rob, what's going on?
Sean, this was thousands of people here tonight. This protest started at about 6 o'clock in Union Square, a little closer to downtown and lower Manhattan. And it moved on up. If you look behind me here, you can see so many people right here outside of Trump Tower, right outside Donald Trump's address and his apartment. And they are very loud. They have been very angry, but they have been peaceful here tonight. But this was really a spectacle of the Never Trump movement. This was a spectacle of the Bernie Sanders supporters in large part, a lot of Hillary supporters out here as well. This was Black Lives Matter. This was a number of different movements all coming together in this sort of Never Trump kind of mentality, trying to take this back. They want a do-over from this election, frankly. And if you looked at it from the air, if we have any video of that, it was an impressive display through the rain, in the cold. They marched all the way from Union Square through Midtown, making a disaster of Midtown traffic. Thousands of people walking up here to Midtown and getting here right outside of Trump Tower. And we want to talk to one of these protesters here, a young lady named Daniela, and she's up here. And let me just ask you, first of all, this is a crowd that's very upset about what happened in the early morning hours, actually today, what we figured out from Election Day. What is it that has you so upset?
I think what has me so upset is the fact that, you know, a lot of people feel victimized by Trump, and a lot of people don't understand and don't feel like, you know, that he represents them. That's why they're saying, not my president, not my president. Yeah. And they reject him as and they
live on Fox News right now, brother.
And they
Give us 30 seconds.
And they reject him, and that's the thing. The reason they reject that they don't believe that he stands for them. And it's created a vacuum for people who do have these racist, sexist, bigot feelings, and it's created a vacuum for them to speak openly about it instead of coming together in love. They've been preaching love. This is the thing.
And I can understand the anger at Donald Trump. A lot of people can understand some of the things he said have been very offensive. Who was it that you voted for, if you don't mind I ask?
Well, I was a Sanders supporter.
You were a Sanders supporter.
But I did vote for Clinton.
You did vote for Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
You know, I mean, Hillary Clinton had her own.
Hey, Rob, let me ask you a question.
A lot of baggage there, too, right? And hang on.
Absolutely, but I feel that, tell me what politician has never had any kind of baggage? I mean, come on. What politician?
And Sean here wants to ask a question. Sean, go
Rob,
ahead.
I want to, all right, she voted for Hillary. Name 3 specific accomplishments of Hillary in her career that helped the American people.
Okay, Sean wants to know, what are the accomplishments that you saw of Hillary Clinton over the 30 years or so she was in office that actually helped the American
Trump
people?
Supporter.
Well, when I was a child, I was actually one of the people that benefit from her health care plan. So as a child, I was on that.
Her health care plan never passed.
I actually received health care from
it never passed.
her initiative. So
Okay.
I think that was something that was really beneficial to me.
All right.
And I don't know. I don't see her as this demonized person, but
Okay, what else? What other than Chip? What else? What did you see? What inspired you to vote for Hillary Clinton, even though you were a Bernie Sanders supporter?
honestly, I really feel like it's just because if you look at the two, I feel like is more about, you know, speaking for people that can't be spoken for, instead of that, you know, that little group of people.
And the anger out here, you think, is palpable. You could feel it in the air.
Yeah, you could definitely feel it. And, you know, I just feel like these people are upset, you know, and they have a right to be upset. And, you know, the things that he said is, like I said, has created a vacuum for people to speak openly about things that really, honestly, instead of teaching tolerance and peace and love, you're teaching hate.
Thank you so much, Danielle.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Very well said. And Sean, you know, out here tonight, if you watched any of the Kelly File right before your show, a lot of this was a good, solid protest. That's the foundation of America. But a lot of it was nonsense. There's so many people here that just want to yell curse words and just want to, you know, hang from the rafters and just do stupid things. So, I mean, we had people bombarding us, jumping on us. We had our producer here, Marta, getting in a fight with a guy. It was just ridiculous. So it's important to people remember why people come out here and protest if you want to take it seriously. I think she did.
The next time somebody says Hillary's health care plan helped them, you might want to remind them she never passed her health care plan. Anyway, Rob, thank you. Appreciate it. Good job. Tonight, the voice of you. We owe a debt of gratitude to you, the American people. It's now finally been heard. It's very loud. It's very clear. And at this very moment, because of all of you speaking so loudly, Washington, D.C., the establishment is terrified, and they should be. These people do not get what happened. I'm going to try to explain it to them. Now, the politicians, the pollsters, the elite media, the global elitists, they're all in shock from President-elect Donald Trump's historic victory yesterday. They said this would never happen. He didn't stand a chance in the Electoral College that voters in swing states wouldn't vote for Donald Trump. And guess what? They were all of them wrong, making this one of the greatest upsets in American political history. So the question is, let's help them understand how we got here. And so what did everybody miss? Peace, prosperity, right? They drive elections. And according to our Fox News poll that was released on Monday, 58% of you, the American people, said they're not satisfied with the direction of the country. And that number has been near or at that level or higher since 2009, since Obama became president. On top of that, we saw the exit polls from last night. It showed that a combined 72% of voters, that's you, are dissatisfied or angry with the federal government and how it's not working. Now, Donald Trump won 77% of those voters who said they're angry. You also have to look at the 40% of voters who said they wanted a candidate who could bring about change. 83% of those particular voters, they voted for Donald Trump. Now, to me, it's pretty obvious why voters felt that way, because the last 8 years have not been good under President Obama. Look at these numbers. Pay very close attention. These are real people, real Americans, real suffering, needless suffering. The lowest labor participation rate since the 70s. Almost 95 million of our fellow Americans are suffering and out of the labor force. The worst recovery since the 1940s. The lowest home ownership rate in 51 years. We now have 43 million of our fellow citizens on food stamps, 12 million more since Obama took office. Over 43 of our fellow citizens, 43 million Americans, they live in poverty. That's up over 8 million since Obama became president. Right now, we have 1 in 5 American families. They don't have a single member of their family in the labor force, in the workforce. And right now, 1 in 6 men between the ages of 18 and 34, prime working years, now they're either in jail, incarcerated, or living in mommy and daddy's basement out of work. And by the time President Obama leaves office, he will have accumulated more debt for this country than all 43 presidents before him combined. Now, everything that I just showed you, it isn't just the numbers. It's not government data. It's, for bureaucrats to say, oh, 43 million, okay, we'll look at that. These are our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers in some cases, real people, real Americans, real lives left behind. They are the forgotten people that Donald Trump has been talking about. He talked about the forgotten man, the forgotten American. Now, President Obama deserves a lot of the blame for this suffering, but so do the Republicans in Washington. They did nothing to stop Obama's agenda, even though they promised over and over again that they would. Republicans, at times, they were timid, they were afraid, they were spineless, they didn't want to take a stand. Republicans sat on their hands while President Obama exploded and doubled the national debt. Now, they have the enumerated power of the purse, but they refused to use it because they thought there would be political fallout and they may lose their jobs. Then you have the promise of Obamacare. Repeal, replace Obamacare. All right, well, that's one of the biggest lies ever told by government in American history. Remember, you like your doctor, you keep your doctor. Like your plan, you keep your plan. And on average, the American family is going to save $2,100 per year with Obamacare. A complete government failure, epic fail lie. The complete opposite happened. Millions of you lost your doctors. Millions lost your plans. Obamacare premiums have been surging by double digits. Even this year alone, many Americans have seen $5,200 increase in health care costs. On average, since Obamacare went in place, $4,100 increase per family. You didn't save any money. And some states are now seeing 100% increase starting in 2017. Now, look, for example, in foreign policy. You got the Iranian nuclear deal. Americans, they're not stupid. Given the #1 state sponsor of terror, $150 billion, the ability to spin their own centrifuges, that's a really bad idea. And you don't pull out of Iraq for pure political purposes, ignoring the American lives, the blood, sweat, the treasure, the tears. These guys fought, bled, and died for cities like Fallujah and Ramadi and Tikrit and Baghdad and Mosul. They won those cities. And then because it wasn't politically expedient, they pulled these guys out after they had these hard-fought victories. And look at Syria. Everyone feels bad for the refugees, victims of a civil war. But if you come from a country or an area of the world that has values that conflict with our constitutional republic, then it might pose a danger to America if we let them come here. Look at Saudi Arabia. Women can't drive. Women need permission to work or to travel. Marital rape in some of these countries is not recognized, and marital beatings not recognized. Gays and lesbians can be killed and thrown off the tops of buildings. And of course, you can't build a church or a temple in a country like Saudi Arabia. Then there's Benghazi. Remember Hillary's failure? 600 separate requests for additional security before the attack. All of them ignored. 4 Americans died. It makes a big difference. Now, we failed the American soldiers, and I'm telling you that happened all from Washington. Let's look at African Americans in America today. And how many African Americans under Obama? What is the increase on food stamps? 58%. African Americans out of the labor force, up almost 20%. In Chicago, President Obama's hometown, over 3,800 people have been shot this year alone. And since Obama's been president, 3,656 people have been murdered in Chicago. And according to the Chicago Tribune, historical statistics now show 75% of those victims are African American. Has the Democratic Party helped these families out? Then on top of that, we've got a failed educational system, especially in inner city America. High school graduation rates are 9% lower for African American students than the national average, according to the most recent statistics. The high school dropout rate for African American students is also higher than the national average. The results should be much, much better that the U.S. is now ranked 4th in the world on per pupil spending, and it works out to be $11,600 per student. Despite the high spending, America ranks 17th in reading, 19th in science, and a whopping 26th in math. $11,600 a student? Donald Trump's going to send that money back to states, towns, municipalities, and then parents and local politicians can make those decisions. Also, you want to know what this election was about? Look at America's open borders. They're a mess, and they're not secure. And Americans knew that if Donald Trump actually builds that wall, then it's less likely that people will cross into the country. It'll also mean that Americans won't be competing with illegal immigrants for the few jobs that are available, driving down wages. And lastly, Americans know that we can become energy independent. And that means we don't have to deal with countries that hate our guts. We have more natural resources here in America that will literally, the lifeblood of our economy, that will fuel this country for generations to come, create millions of high-paying jobs and careers. Now, by the end of this week, I will outline the agenda that I believe that the forgotten people need so that the rungs of the ladder will be put back in so they can climb to success themselves. Those Americans that all these D.C. politicians, Republicans, Democrats have ignored for way too long. Get people back to work. They can climb out of the pit that big government has put them in. I said that I'm, going to spend a lot of time naming names on this program. Well, I'm not sure if I will. I want the agenda advanced and as quickly as possible. Now, I'll say this to the politicians in Washington. I don't care if you have an R before your name, a D before your name. You either get on board solving these problems for these suffering Americans, I'm done with you. You either fix the problems, do your job, risk your career, be bold, be courageous, show vision, or get out of the way. That's how I feel. I'm also going to be calling out the abusively biased and corrupt media. WikiLeaks has shown us there is corruption in our media at a level we have never known. It's an informational crisis in America, and it is doing the American people, you, a grave disservice. Back in 2008, I said journalism was dead. But as WikiLeaks has exposed, it's far worse than any of us ever imagined. We now know that Donna Brazile over at CNN, the Clinton News Network, she's handing over debate questions so Hillary can cheat. CNN is asking the DNC for questions that they should ask Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina during interviews. Reporters asking the Clinton campaign for approval before they publish their stories. These so-called journalists allowed the campaign to edit quotes. John Harwood, CNBC, he was offering the campaign advice and bragging about going after Trump when he was a moderator at a debate. Well, that's the least of it. Now, WikiLeaks exposed how dozens of so-called journalists from all these major outlets, except the Fox News channel, were invited to eat dinner, wine and dined by John Podesta at his house. We'll be getting all of that out to you, but let me show you what this election is all about. Look at this painting right there. I love this guy. His name is John McMartin. Let's put it full screen if we can for a minute. It's called The Forgotten Man. And if you look there, there's a President Obama stomping on the Constitution. And there's all the presidents, obviously before Donald Trump. And there's that guy on the bench sitting there, and he's the one that has been left out. The people of Wisconsin, Ohio, Iowa, the people of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and all across this country, they saw this election for what it was: massive government failure, a massive decline, a precipitous decline in this country, and men and women, our fellow citizens, forgotten, like that guy on a bench. That's what this is about. And Donald Trump, the outsider, says he's going to fix these problems, and we have to wish him well. That's what nobody saw in this historic election. You saw it. And coming up tonight, a lot to get to. We'll continue to monitor all these anti-Trump protests in several cities. We'll check in with Laura Ingraham, then later House Speaker Newt Gingrich. All of that and Monica Crowley and Herman Cain straight ahead. And this is a Fox News alert. Angry anti-Trump protesters and protests breaking out in major cities now all across the country after Donald Trump's major electoral victory. We're going to be following those closely tonight. Joining us now with reaction, the editor-in-chief of Life Zed, Fox News contributor, and a nationally syndicated radio host. I had the honor of being on our show this morning. Laura Ingraham, you are one of the few. Monica Crowley, Herman Cain, Newt Gingrich is coming up. We saw the possibility, and so many of our colleagues, let's put it that way, were hoping upon hope that they'd be trashing us today. Why do you see this?
Well, I went...
Yeah, you what?
Yeah, I went on Twitter before when I was listening to your report, and I just started posting flashback prognostications from a year ago and summertime. It's over. Hillary's won the presidency. Donald Trump can never win the presidency. Our friend Eric Erickson, I've disinvited him from Red State. I'm sorry, but I do think it's not gloating. It's a realization that the forgotten people, as you described so aptly, have looked for a champion. Not someone who's perfect, but someone who they know when push comes to shove will fight for them. First, fight for their interests, fight for their future, fight for their children. And they found that person in Donald Trump. And they found it on the issues of trade, of globalization, of borders, of Obamacare. And as you pointed out, Sean, calling out the politically correct verbiage that is propagated on college campuses. A lot of the protesters that you're seeing tonight with their foul language and their disrespect, they embody what is being taught on college campuses: illogical thinking, poor grammar, bromides, cliches. There's no real substance. It's just an emotion. Everyone's emoting tonight. And as my deceased mother would have said, suck it up, Buttercup. It's not fun to lose, but not everybody gets a trophy. That's another falsehood that's been taught by the modern culture. So Trump held up a mirror to all these failures, and he called them out brashly sometimes. But it was invigorating for a lot of folks. We didn't know how it was going to end, but we thought that if these issues were put forward in a really bold way, he'd have a fighting chance against the Clintons, frankly, the Bushes, Hollywood, academia, and some of the GOP establishment here in Washington, D.C., and along with Hillary and all of her henchmen. And by golly, he did it. And I think we should learn a lot about just what people generally want, which is just a chance at a better life and less government.
Those people are suffering needlessly, and they've been suffering for a long time. And you know, when you think of how bad things got in the last 8 years, nobody seemed to want to talk about that. You're right. Donald Trump went up against the Republican establishment, the Democratic establishment, the media establishment, the globalist establishment. You know, Brett Baier, they asked me to call in last night, so I called in, and he asked me, well,
I saw that.
How is Donald Trump going to deal with House Republicans and Democrats? And I said, I don't think that's the question. I think it's how are they going to deal with him? Because he will set the agenda. He has the mandate, not those people that in part created the opening for him, I would argue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's the one who was elected. He's the one who took the slings and arrows of the Democrats, again, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, all the Hollywood elites who like to campaign every 4 years for the Democratic nominee. He took that, he dished it out, but he also took it. And now is a time for those in Congress who didn't really have a light bulb on this until recently, to stand up and say, we hear you people, we hear the people of the country, we hear your concerns, and we're going to work tirelessly for your benefit, not for just the Chamber of Commerce or the Business Roundtable or for the big donors, but for the workaday person who sometimes has to, work at night or work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. And as long as Donald Trump does that, and as he expands the understanding of what he's trying to do, this populist appeal, I think he should continue to push into inner city America. He shouldn't do what Bush did oftentimes, which is to write off the people. And Romney did that with a 47% comment. Don't write off any of America. Go into those inner cities. Continue to do that. Push into the Latino community, the black community. You bumped up the returns among Latinos and blacks 2% in each category. That's not bad, considering how he was vilified by the press for what he believed and what he said. So I think there's an enormous growth potential, both for the economy, Sean, and also for this populist message that a lot of those kids that are running around New York and Portland, Oregon tonight, they don't really understand. They've never been taught it in college campuses, and they certainly haven't been taught it at home, most likely. I
think one of the more underreported platforms of Trump was his New Deal with Black America and African Americans, and that is that we're going to make your community safer, we're going to fix your schools, and we're going to create economic zones where people can obviously benefit. If he's successful in enticing multinational corporations by giving us one of the lowest tax rates in the industrialized world, and he allows the repatriation of trillions that companies won't bring in because of the high tax rate, what if he incentivized them even further to go into those communities that have been hit hardest with the highest unemployment numbers and where kids can't get summer jobs? And wouldn't that be helpful and show Republicans do care about Americans working, regardless of race, creed, color, background?
Right. Sean, you're right. Results matter. And he won, even though the kids in the street don't really like it. They want to cause trouble. I get that. But he won. And now it's time to implement this agenda. We know the old ways haven't worked. We've piled up debt. You've cataloged this, by the way, better than anyone on television, night after night after night. What these failed ideas have done to middle-class Americans, people just entering the workforce, young people right out of college, you've cataloged it. It's devastating. These policies do not work. We have to try new policies. Trump campaigned on that. I hope everybody in Congress on the Republican side stands with him instead of fighting him. I mean, they didn't fight Obama on a lot of things. They shouldn't fight Trump on the issues that propelled him into the presidency. I hope we don't see that because we certainly didn't see that gusto in trying to roll back these executive orders of Obama or defund the Planned Parenthood. So I hope they certainly stand with him on these issues that you've hit every night.
I think with the lower tax rates, Reagan did it, John F. Kennedy did it. Add to that a push towards energy independence, the Keystone Pipeline, fracking, natural gas, drilling, oil.
New trade deals. Trade deals.
Yeah, free and fair.
I mean, this is an amazing country with magnificent people who want to work. They don't want to be slaves to the government. And if he implements this agenda, this will be a renaissance across America. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. But he's got to resist the idea of going into your cocoon. Keep doing what he did in Detroit and all across this country that drove the left crazy. Sean, now you know why it drove the left crazy. Because he's getting into their territory that they've dominated for so long. I'm very excited about the potential.
I think there's a lot of potential and a lot of work to do. There's no doubt about it. A lot of Republicans will have to get on board or get out of the way. Laura, good to see you. Thank you.
Exactly.
Coming up, we'll continue to monitor all these anti-Trump protests across the country. And up next tonight.
To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
Donald Trump, after being elected the 45th president of the United States last night, calling for unity. We'll check in next with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, and up later, Monica Crowley, Herman Cain. They're here. That and more straight ahead.
To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. While the campaign is over, our work on this movement is now really just beginning.
And that was President-elect Donald Trump last night after it was announced he will be the 45th president of the United States. Joining us now, best-selling author of the new book Treason, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, big smile on his face, Newt Gingrich. There was a part of me today that really wanted to name names of those Republicans, those... all right, you're going to show yourself the bigger man. But I resisted the temptation to name names. All those people that sabotaged him, were not helpful, did everything to hurt him, and frankly, if they were successful, would be beating people like you and me over the head with a baseball bat and saying, oh, see, they were all wrong the whole time. But I didn't do it. Aren't you proud of me?
Right. I'm very proud of you. I think it's a sign of your newfound post-victory maturity.
All right. What do you...
I mean,
go ahead.
Let me just say this, because we've known each other so long. You and I, along with millions of other Americans, are just beginning one of the great adventures of our lifetime. The 8 years of Donald Trump are going to be among the most extraordinary, creative, inventive, exciting periods in all of American political history, and will, I think, both move America back to being great again, dramatically drain the swamp in Washington, and move our systems into the 21st century to provide much, much better experiences for every American. Now, my only point is, compared to all that, the little whiny, sniveling, negative cowards who were never Trumpers are beneath our paying attention to them. Let them drift off into the ash bin of history while we go ahead and work with Donald Trump and with the House and Senate Republicans to create a dramatically new future.
Do you believe the old order Republican Party, I believe it's dead, and there's a new Republican Party, and hopefully one that's revitalized with bold colored differences, as President Reagan talked about? Do you worry about those old guard Republican establishment people eventually, as quickly as they can, turning on Trump and stopping progress that he's laid out and I think got a mandate for last night?
Look, their technique won't be to turn on him. I remember this both with Reagan in 81, 82, and then with us once we got a majority in 94. Their technique will be to say, oh, be reasonable. Don't push too hard. Don't force the issue. Find a compromise with Democrats. Maybe he shouldn't name one of the justices who are conservative who's on his list. Maybe he should find a nice, moderate, acceptable to the Democrats. Down that road is a disaster. And so we have to be aware that the danger is not that they're going to actively fight. The danger is that they're going to offer honeyed words of subversion that undermines the entire movement to make America great again, undermines the entire Trump movement, which is beginning to change America. But I have a hunch, just based on today's conversations. We were in Charleston, now we're talking to you from Atlanta. And as I talked to people all around the place, one, lots of people walked up and said congratulations, including people who are for Hillary. They said, look, you guys won a great campaign, and we just respect that you did it. Two, there is a spirit here of what if we could actually come together to get big things done. Now, that doesn't mean backing off on anything, but I would suggest to you, for example, that a really dramatic infrastructure program will get at least half the Democrats to sign up for it and be exactly in the job-creating direction that Donald Trump has talked about for a year and a half. So there are ways to build the next 6 months that it becomes a really pretty remarkable majority-building project that sets the stage for greater economic growth, greater take-home pay on terms that Trump has campaigned on.
I want to get to that, and let's go through the order of what you think the agenda ought to be and how he gets there. We'll have more with Speaker Gingrich right after this break. Also tonight, Monica Crowley, Herman Cain, they react to Donald Trump being elected the 45th president of the United States. Former Speaker of the House and Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich is with us. Should the old order, the people... If you remember back in the primaries, the 65% of Republican voters that said they felt betrayed by their own party, does that old order, many of whom were reelected last night, do they deserve to hit the reset button and work with Trump? Or do you think that maybe there needs to be a restructuring?
No, I think, first of all, the proof will be in the pudding. And so far, we have great comments from Mitch McConnell, who is the most important single person in the opening 30 or 45 days, because every single cabinet officer has to be approved by the Senate. And if you don't have the active, energetic support of the Senate leader, you ain't getting nothing done, and you're not going to have a cabinet. So I think Trump has got to be close to McConnell. McConnell, of course, has an enormous interest in ending the war against coal. And there are things that Trump can do on the very first day by repealing a variety of executive orders that will make McConnell very happy. So I think that could be a great relationship. Today, as you know, because you and I were emailing about it, Speaker Paul Ryan, speaking in Janesville, his hometown, gave a great ringing endorsement of Trump and said, look, this guy won the nomination in a remarkable way. He won the presidency decisively. He is the leader of our country and the leader of our party. And therefore, we all have an obligation to work with him. And you could not have asked for a more complete commitment to cooperate than you got from Paul Ryan. Now, that doesn't mean that guys who are as smart and as committed as McConnell and Ryan are going to roll over and do everything that, Donald Trump wants, nor, frankly, as conservatives, would we want the legislative branch to not exercise judgment and to not try to help improve legislation and improve ideas. But I'm very encouraged. There are going to be a handful of bitter enders who are saying, oh, I could never work with Trump. There are not going to be many of them, and they're all going to face a primary fight in 2018. There will also be a handful of people who are so pure that they can't be practical and work with Donald Trump. But I think it's a little hard coming out of this election to make the argument back home that you are more for change than Donald Trump, and therefore you can't work with him. So I think the Freedom Caucus types may in fact find themselves working with Trump and Ryan more than they thought they would.
Well, that probably
Trump
would be a good thing if it's
personifies change.
Yeah. If they're going to, open up energy independence and education back to the states, build a border wall, lower taxes, get the budget under control, those are all good things. If you were to advise Donald Trump, where does he go from here? How do you build this government? What's first on the agenda? Walk us through.
Well, I think he's got to do two or three things in parallel. He has to reach out and create a good working relationship with McConnell and Ryan, because so much of his opening 90 days depends on a team effort. He has to think through, how bold does he want to be? Is he going to bring in a team to manage the federal government, or is he going to bring in a team to change the federal government? Those are very different conditions and have very different teams. Some people are obvious. I mean, you know that Rudy Giuliani is going to have a major role. You know that Senator Sessions is going to have a major role. I mean, these are people so integral to the campaign that they are bound to be close to Trump in a major position.
Maybe
but
Newt
for every
Gingrich?
other job out there, well, maybe in a particular way. But what you really want to think about is, are you bringing somebody in to manage the bureaucracy of the Veterans Administration, or are you bringing somebody in to profoundly change it? Now, those are two very different recruiting jobs. And I think things like that. The other thing I would say is that Trump needs to pick a limited initial set of really big changes that he wants to come in with, that defines the first 6 to 8 or 9 months of his presidency in domestic policy. One of them clearly is a big infrastructure bill. One of them has to be getting control of the southern border. You have a list, I know, that's very compelling and very powerful. And so, all of which, by the way, came out of Trump's speeches. So it's not, it's not like we're suggesting new things. But I think that communicated to the team, so all the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans understand, look, here's the next 90 or 100 days, so they can get in the rhythm of doing that. That could really accelerate progress.
I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker. You've been extraordinarily generous with your time, your insight. You put yourself out there on a limb, and I know you worked behind the scenes helping President-elect Trump, and I have a funny feeling you might be around him a lot. Just a guess on my part. I don't know. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be with you.
And coming up, Monica Crowley, Herman Cain, they'll weigh in. They'll also respond to the anti-Trump protests going on around the country and much more. And welcome back to Hannity. So tomorrow morning, President-elect Donald Trump will meet with President Obama at his new home. Well, coming in January, the White House, as they begin the transition of power. Joining us now, Fox News contributors Herman Cain, Monica Crowley, both were big Donald Trump supporters, and good for both of you. And you know what? Look, we all took a little heat, didn't we?
A little heat, yes. Sean? We took a lot of heat. In fact, I was the first one a couple of weeks after Donald Trump made his announcement.
You did.
In June of 2015.
You were.
And I came on this network and I did radio with Don Imus and so many other people. And I said, stop laughing. Do not underestimate him. He can win the whole thing.
And I mean,
and here we are. Donald Trump is the president.
Monica Crowley's with her. I have no idea what she's smoking, but I still like her. She's nice girl. Herman, you took some heat too.
I did. I went to 3 Donald Trump rallies, introduced him 3 times, and obviously I took some heat, but I didn't care because I wasn't looking at all of the BS that was being thrown at him. And the people who went to the rallies, let me tell you, that was his ground game. Here's what nobody's talked about, Sean. 10,000 people show up for a rally, they're going to tell 10,000 people. That's his ground game. That was his ground game, and it worked. It was unconventional, but it worked. And I got to tell you, those people heard the substance of what he was talking about at those rallies, even though it wasn't reported
and by
on the nightly
Herman,
news.
And then, or Monica, I'll go to you. And then they posted it on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. He got more bang for his buck. I think he probably has spent less money than any presidential candidate in 50 years.
He ran his campaign like a business, and he's going to run the country like a business, too. Look, what we saw last night is the most astonishing political story, certainly of our lifetimes, maybe in the history of the Republic. This is a man who has never done this before, basically had no money in his campaign, and had a very skeletal campaign staff, and he pulled the whole thing off. One of the big reasons why he did was he spoke directly to the issues that affect the livelihoods of the American people: jobs, economic growth, illegal immigration, the border, trade deals. But there was also something else, and Herman just touched on this. What you saw in the groundswell that brought Donald Trump to the presidency last night is the second iteration of the Tea Party movement.
You're right.
So the Tea Party movement that began in 2009 as a wholesale rejection of Barack Obama and his far-left radical policies, including Obamacare and the Iran deal, which came later. But all of these things, the Tea Party then was assaulted by a weaponized IRS. And guess what? They came back this time in a new form. They evolved, and they helped to elect Donald Trump.
Is the old order GOP dead, Herman Cain?
Yes. There will be a political civil war within the GOP over the next couple of years, because Donald Trump has redefined and he will reshape what Republican stands for. Those conservative values aren't going to go away. No, that's not it. And as Monica indicated, this is the second iteration of the Tea Party. And just like the liberal media tried to demagogue the Tea Party to push them into silence and submission, and to some extent they did that, they didn't know how to push this movement into submission. They tried to say it was uneducated whites. They tried to label it something else. It hasn't worked. So yes, the Republican Party is going to have to rethink and redefine itself.
All right, guys, good to see you all. How much sleep did you get last night? Quick, how long? I got an hour.
3.5.
1. Herman?
2 hours.
All right, when we come back, we need your help. Straight ahead. All right, time for a question of the day. So, well, what did you think of last night's election results? Just go to facebook.com/Sean Hannity, at Sean Hannity on Twitter. Let us know what you think. If I didn't make any sense tonight, it's because I only had an hour's sleep, not even a full hour. Anyway, thanks for being with us. We'll be back. Get some sleep. We'll be a little fresher tomorrow. Thanks for being with us. And thanks for all of you that went and voted and saved your country.